This is the Mediate Now with Winter Wheeler. Your clear choice for expert mediation and negotiation advice. But it's so much more than that. Take our advice, you will improve your entire life. Are you ready? Let's get to it. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Today, our special guest is Stephanie Holt. She has a broad perspective that comes from over 30 years of work experience, both in the U.S. and internationally. Previously holding executive leadership positions in public and private technology companies for over 15 years, Stephanie understands the complexity, challenges, and rewards of working in both large multinational companies and in financial technology startup environments. Her focus has always been on driving business outcomes and creating places where people love to work. After retiring as the CFO of a fintech company in 2020, she spends 100% of her time advocating for women in STEM executive leadership. Currently, Stephanie works as a facilitator with executive leadership teams to set and achieve goals which make workplaces safe and welcoming for all. Thank you so much for being here, Stephanie. I'm really excited.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited too.
So, as I think all of my guests have been, we met on LinkedIn. Yeah. And I have been following you, I'm not sure how long, but for a while. And you are absolutely prolific.
Well, if that means I talk a lot, yes. It's funny because, so I retired in February of 2020 and I had 11 events planned, including my 30th wedding anniversary and both of my daughter's weddings. And 3 weeks later, COVID hit. And so every single thing got canceled. And, you hear this and they say this, after you have been in your job for so long and to sort of work your way out of it. And unfortunately, my plan blew up. So what I started doing was posting on LinkedIn sort of to keep my sanity. And it's been it's been a blessing for me. I have met a lot of people that I consider friends now, but yes, I do post every single day. So prolific is a nice way to say it. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, but I totally mean it. So you're posting a lot, but you're posting things that are meaningful. And where do you derive, where are you getting your inspiration for these posts every day?
So it's funny. So I don't pre-plan my posts. I don't schedule it. I don't have any kind of scheduling app. So whatever, my husband and I walk in the morning about 6:00 and, we've been married 31 years and whatever we argue about or whatever, one of us has seen that we start talking about that during that conversation. And periodically, if I overhear someone else's conversation, I will come home and sit down and that is what I post about. So some days I literally post about my breakfast and, some days I post about sexual harassment. And I struggled with that a little bit because there's a lot of people who say, this is what you need to do. You need to do polls. You need to do video. You need to do this. And I don't. I text post. And what somebody did say to me, though, that really resonated was, yeah, you're not selling a product, but you are selling a message. And that kind of changed it for me because I was like, you know what? You're right. So, they talk about metrics on LinkedIn and how, if you talk about your views or your likes or your comments, those are vanity metrics. But I realized that for me, my views on LinkedIn, not my personal views, but the views I get on LinkedIn are incredibly important to me because we all know that when people hear the same thing over and over and over and over again, it starts to become a part of the way that they think. So if I say, pay women, pay women, pay women, pay women, ultimately people are going to think oh, wow, I should pay her the same as I'm paying the man in the same position.
Oh my God. Yes. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that. I love that. How you do that at the end of almost every post. You're oh, and by the way, pay women.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it.
It's funny because for the last 8 years, I was with a startup that I was the CFO of. So I had a lot of control, for lack of a better word, of both the culture and sort of how people were getting treated. And I let myself start to think that things were better for women. And I didn't realize until last year how bad things still really were for most women, not just in terms of getting paid, but in terms of workplace culture, in terms of harassment of many different ways. And so, that was a lesson. It was a lesson for me because, I thought, okay, the women around me, it's going pretty well. They're getting paid equally, but that's not the reality.
No, and we could have a whole show on like my own experiences with those things. I mean, we definitely could. But I love that you were in a position of power where you were able to help direct what was going on. And it kind of got you in this mindset that things were better everywhere.
Yeah.
You were able to kind of block out the rest of it. And what's amazing about COVID, and I don't know if it's good, bad, or otherwise, but it's really ripped that veil off, and it did it very, very quickly. So we now see just how hard women have had it.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. But I also agree with you. I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent either.
Yeah, I mean, I have no answers.
Same, honestly. I do know that it's highlighted things, right? It's highlighted things that people don't like to talk about, right? It's highlighted things where women are still the primary responsibility for caregiving at home. And my kids are grown. My daughters are 26 and 30. Like I say, one had a small wedding. The other one's postponed her wedding 3 times, but it's coming. And, I like to think that things would be different, but, there's a lot of discussion about how, the primary responsibility at home with the kids and with the cleaning and whatever still falls to the women, and it makes it so hard. And that's why so many women have also left the workforce during COVID. And there's a lot of conversations about how companies could and should help this. And while I believe that companies have a responsibility, I also believe that there's a responsibility at home to get your partner doing things, to set a standard where you're getting help. It is not strictly your company needs to solve this problem. It's interesting because my younger daughter is pregnant. And so, I'm super duper excited to be a grandma. This is like my life's goal. And, she is having a boy. And so I have 2 daughters, so have no boy experience. And at 5 months pregnant, she is saying things to me like, she is very focused on how a man who is a feminist, who is not a racist, who understands women, and who is a good partner and a good husband. And she's thinking about this even before he's born. So, I had things with my girls that I thought about when they were born, which is, how do I raise strong, independent, confident women? But I certainly was not going through the thought process that she is going through, which is before he's even born, and how she wants to raise him to be just a great human.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as the mother of 3 little boys, I definitely understand that. I constantly am, I'm constantly baffled by some of the things that they do, because I'm like, I know who's raising you, and I'm working so hard.
Right.
Why did you do that?
Yeah.
Why did you say that? So I definitely understand that. I definitely understand where the worry comes from.
Yeah.
If I'm in a position to give any advice, it would be,
please
don't worry about it, because you're going to do the best that you can,
right,
no matter what, right? She's already thinking about it.
Right.
And when you're thinking about it, that means you're doing a good job.
Actually, that is a great point. That is a great point, as opposed to people who are just letting it. And I believe, parenting is rough. And I am of the belief that no one is setting out to screw up their kids.
Right.
And even some of the adults you see now and you think, and I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes people will say things or do things and I literally will think like, who raised you? But no mom is setting out to ruin their children. So, but I do think, and I mean, and you can tell me what you think about this. I think it's a hard time to raise kids. I think it's much harder than it was, 30 years ago when I started doing it.
Yes. My kids are 3, 5, 7, and 9.
Wow. Okay.
And it's crazy. And I was feeling a lot of stress and anxiety about raising them in general in the cultural climate that we're in. I live in Atlanta, it's the Deep South and all of this. But then, COVID hits. I couldn't figure out what I was supposed to do. Their school had an in-person option.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to weigh that. And I'm like, well, if I keep them home, they're going to have a harder time with school because I'm a terrible teacher. And if I send them to school, then they might catch COVID.
Right.
And it was just like this impossible decision. So like parenting is just a series of impossible decisions. And the technology makes it that much worse. Things that I never will even think of my kids have access to. And I try to take the iPads and all of that from them, but because of COVID, they had more access to them. That's how they were doing their schoolwork, because my ultimate decision was to keep them home.
Right.
And so now they know all about all of these things that are on the internet that I never would have exposed them to. And it's hard to get them away from it.
Yeah.
So, and
we won't know for years, right? We won't know for years if maybe that was a good thing.
Yeah,
maybe that exposure is a good thing.
It's true, though. Now we think of the internet as kind of this crazy place where God knows what's going to be said to you, and right. you're ready for it when you hit post.
Right.
Earlier, we were like, what is this? This is so offensive. It's like no one would say this to my face. No, of course they wouldn't. When we're on the internet, so they're not saying it to your face.
Right. Or they wouldn't say it with their real name attached to it, right? Or their real picture or anything like that. Yeah, it's been, internet trolls has been really interesting for me because I was like, how does anybody have the time or inclination to do this? Like you literally don't have anything else. It's crazy.
I know. I wish I had that kind of time. I would turn it into a vacation, not like bothering people.
Exactly. Take the time to do a little good, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so, I knew I had to have you on the show when I saw a post you did on mindset and kind of the toxicity behind mindset and what it needs to look like before you can become this enlightened person, essentially.
Yeah.
Do you remember the post I'm talking about?
I remember the post, and it's interesting. So I have strong feelings on a lot of things. And one of the things when I retired, I thought, hey, you know what? I have all this experience. I might be like an executive coach. And I think what happened with COVID is a lot of people were encouraged to sort of hang out their own shingle and to, because either you lost your job or it wasn't working out with being home with the kids. And there has, and I had done some certifications and stuff like that. And, I think I was a pretty good leader. I could have been better, but I was pretty good. And I'm also could say to someone like, hey, that's horrible. How can you treat someone like that? So I thought, kind of in my retirement, I'll do this a little bit. Then there was this kind of glut of coaches on LinkedIn. And a lot of the messaging is something like, one, I'm pretty good at life, so I can be a life coach. Okay, what? No, what? No, because you live a life, you can't be a life coach, for heaven's sakes. And by the way, what is even a life coach? So then I felt that sort of morphed into this. I am And they're kind of specific too, because like, I'm a legal mindset coach, or I'm a STEM mindset coach. And I was like, what in the hell does that even mean? And by the way, my mindset is mine. You can't change my mindset by telling me you should change your mindset.
Right.
And just felt like there was a lot. And because of COVID too, I think a lot of people spent a lot more time online. So I start thinking about these people who have maybe lost their jobs, who, you know, are struggling at home. And then all the messaging they're seeing is, oh, everything will be fine if you change your mindset, which is a big fat lie, right? I could have a great mindset, which, you know, generally I don't, but, you know, I could have a great mindset and still not be able to feed my kids. And by the way, I don't need to pay you $1,000 that I don't have anyway to help me with the mindset that you can't change for me. So yes, Winter, to answer your question, I do remember that post.
Very clearly.
Sometimes, yeah, you know, people can tell when I have a rage post. That was, in fact, a rage post because I had literally just read probably 3 posts in a row that were talking about, hey, you know, I can help you be a better you. And I certainly think that people can improve. And I certainly think that there is some merit to coaching skills. I don't love coaching like mindset and stuff like that. So, you know, a lot of times I'm a party of one thinking that, but I don't think that putting people down and making people feel bad about where they are is a way to light a fire under them to make change.
I agree 100%. And there's kind of this push, this movement happening amongst life coaches where they're forcing people to take full accountability for absolutely every feeling they have. I don't understand that.
Right. And whether they have any control over it or not.
Exactly. You know, and it's frustrating to see posts like that because when you ask follow-up questions, there's no response. So it's like, okay, so when I was abused by my parents, I was supposed to do what? I chose a victim mindset. Right.
Or when I was sexually harassed at work, but was a single mom and had to keep a roof over my head. What was your plan? And by the way, this person has never been sexually harassed at work, right? Or never maybe abused by their parents. So it started to feel just so, you know, and this sounds dramatic saying it, but it almost started to feel dangerous.
I don't think that that's dramatic because I think that it is dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it is victim blaming. And I think people who are in these situations, who are genuine victims of something that someone else has done, now suddenly they're thinking, well, I guess maybe I should have done X. I could have done X. When in reality, we make the best decisions for ourselves based on the totality of the circumstances and the knowledge we have in the moment, period.
Right. And I also believe that there is a space for someone to encourage you and maybe role play with you and do stuff. But there are professionals, right? There are professionals that understand the implications and the dynamics and things to deal with these things. I shouldn't say I'm a life coach just because I've lived a life, or I'm a parenting coach just because I have kids. You know, leadership I feel a little bit differently about because really, who's that going to kill? You know, if you are a good leader and have some, you know, teaching skills or whatever, sure, you know. But the other thing I don't agree with, though, while I'm telling you all the things I don't agree with,
please,
is this. Oh, this is the kind of leader you are, so this is what you need to do. So you're a leader, you're LMNOP leader. I had somebody send me something the other day that were like, oh, I believe that you're a IXTFN, and I was like, delete. You know what? There is no box. There is no, your leadership style is Winter. You are a leader. it is not you are a servant leader or you are a, whatever kind of leader. It is, you are the leader. And so sure, maybe it's interesting to read things. So you might think about how you want to do things differently or how your way is better. It's interesting to see the way other people lead. That worked really well, or I will never in my life do that. And that's how you become a leader. But I hate this. This is your leadership box. And because of that, this is how you're going to react to this situation. Wait, what? Like, how do you know that? That's false. So yes, I don't love boxes.
I hate boxes. I hate boxes. And I talk about that a lot because people are always trying to put me in a box. My entire life, they've been trying to put me in a box. And I am just one of these lucky people who like naturally came to the world like, no, it's not happening.
Right.
And one of the reasons I do this show is because I know most people are not like that. Most people are definitely not like that. And I don't want to see anybody feel limited or be limited based on something someone has told them.
Right.
So for me, when I study these types of leaders and personality types and all of that, I think it's really, really interesting.
Same. Yep.
But it's mainly to see, are there other ways that I could communicate with someone else? It's not to pigeonhole myself, to pigeonhole anyone else, but to understand this range of personalities that are out there and see if I can do better.
Right. And it can be very tactical, right? It can be very tactical. So, if someone reacts in a certain way, and because I know that you do a lot of work around, with your background and now with your mediating, it's, around sort of the emotional aspect of it, like how often that's been taken out of the equation, right?
Right.
Let me just tell you what you do. But
I love that
no, for sure. But it's interesting because, and what I like about that and what you said is that, okay, you will learn more about how to react to when people are doing certain things. Maybe I am acting like one person 1 minute and then a different type of personality the next minute. So you have taken the time to learn the best way to react to that. Someone telling me I'm that personality does not tell me what I'm going to do to start, right? Just because I'm an arguer doesn't mean that I need to argue every single point every single time. So I think that you're right. I think that it's important to know almost just best practices, right? Because a lot of things that I do are extremely tactical because I try to avoid this whole sort of blanketing things and blanketing people. So from a tactical perspective, I'm sure exactly what to do if someone reacts in a certain way, whether they're, clenching their fists or they're saying something or they're doing something versus whether they act a different way. What you don't know or anyone doesn't know is how they're going to react to each individual thing in the first place.
Exactly. Because there are so many variables. Like, who knows what happened to you that day? And I think that was also it was either in the same post that I was talking about, the rage post, or it was in another rage post. Yep. But it was about like how you have to function no matter what's going on in your life. And that's true. So someone might come into mediation and be just the rudest person I've ever met in my life. And then as we're going through the process, they say, my dog died this morning. Okay. Now I understand. Now I'm better equipped to work with you and help you through this. Because people react to what's happening in their life. You show up no matter where you go as your whole self. And you are the accumulation of everything that's going on. And you don't even know what all of that is sometimes.
Well, and I would agree with that. In fact, probably most of the time, right? You have to be pretty in touch with yourself. And some of us just completely try to avoid that. So, a lot of times you don't even know what I've been married 31 years. There's days my husband will walk in and I'm like, you are the most irritating person on the face of the earth. Had he done anything specifically? Had he done anything specifically to me in that moment? No. And I don't even know why I feel that way. But, and of course he's legally obligated to deal with that. But, there's a lot of times that I react to things and I'll think later, like, why did I react that way? But it's not like I'm going to delve into it and try to figure it out.
Right. And we try to let it go and hopefully it goes away. But then sometimes you're like looking at them and you're like, why are you chewing like that? Do you have to chew like that?
Yes.
And other days it doesn't bother me.
The list is long. Yes.
As an aside, I saw a meme not too long ago, and it was, other than "that's fine," what death threats do women use?
That's hilarious.
I laugh so hard. Getting us back on track. What got you into the field of being a facilitator with executive leadership teams?
Yes. Well, so this is actually when I left my job, like I said, I had this year planned that it was the year of Stephanie, honestly. It was no work, no anything. And then when COVID happened, there was such a gap in my life. And what I realize now is that I was really afraid of becoming irrelevant. And because when you've worked so hard to get something, and I came up in tech through the 80s and 90s when there was no women and I was in the Bay Area. Yeah. When you work so hard for something and it's been such a focus, and it sounds great to be like, I'm free of that. But, for me, a lot of me got wrapped up in my job title. And so when that's gone, and I wasn't aware of this, like I was ready for this. And that's why I had all these plans. And when everything stopped, it was terrifying. And so that's one of the reasons I got active on LinkedIn. And then what I found I was doing, and I still wasn't really planning to work, but what I found that I was doing, which is what happens to a lot of women in particular. So people would see my posts and they would come to me and they would say, will you be on my podcast? Sure. Will you come and do leadership training at my company? Sure. Will you do a series of 10 leadership trainings at my company? Sure. So literally, will you work with me one-on-one because I'm at this director level and then I want to be an executive? Sure. So what I was doing is literally what I tell everyone not to do, which is saying yes to everything. And it was because, and this one I did kind of think about it, kind of looked a little bit inwardly and thought, I am terrified of becoming nothing. And so I said yes to everything. And I said yes to things that, that I was good at, but it wasn't really what was meaningful to me. And so I had to start thinking about what did I really want to do, because it became clear that I was not going to be able to be 100% retired because I'm not quite there yet, though I had hoped to be. So I had a couple of women that I met on LinkedIn who came to me. So one, and we had talked before, and she was leaving a corporate job to start her own company, and her company just took off in supply chain. And so she had brought on 2 other female leaders, and she reached out to me and said, Stephanie, we are 3 30-something female leaders. We have had to hire 8 people this year. We are going to have a retreat and figure out what our leadership style is going to be, figure out some of the things about our startup. And she said, and we talked about it, and we need you there. And we need you there sort of as a disinterested third party who can facilitate the hard conversations around both the work and the leadership. And as we talked about it and got ready for it, what I thought is, this is it. This is the thing that I want to do, because I can impact people at scale, because it's what the leadership team is going to, be doing. And also, when you're a third party, you can kind of say and that's the thing I like about being retired on LinkedIn. I can say anything I want to. Like, what's the blowback on me? Whereas someone else might eventually want to get a job. So you still have to be kind of careful. But, I could go in and say literally to a CEO, what are you thinking? Like, what are you doing? Like, you are pushing your own, you are pretending that this is a consensus and you are pushing your own agenda. And so, and also, it's okay with me if it's a one-time thing. So if I go in somewhere and offend someone, that's okay too. And so as I thought about kind of the details of it, I thought, this is the thing for me. This is the culmination of everything I want to do, which ultimately, creates better workplaces for everyone. And ultimately, it's very important for me for women to be seen and heard. And sometimes even when you're in executive leadership, you're not still quite heard. So this is a way that I can stand there and make sure that everyone is heard. It doesn't mean that everyone's ideas are going to be acted upon, but I can certainly make sure that everyone is heard. And that to me is the be all end all.
Yes. I love that. And I can relate to that in my mediation sense, because I'm there and my job is to help everyone figure out what in the world is going on, what they should be saying to each other, and if there are any huge pitfalls that they are not seeing in their lawsuit, right? Because they're going through this process for so long, they get entrenched into their own thoughts, and sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. And so I show up and I'm like, no, I think you've missed this. And let's talk through what that looks like. Let's talk through what that means. And then, and occasionally it is a fundamental fact that has gotten them so off track. It's like you've completely misunderstood this basic idea, but then you have also created this foundation on that little fact that has now turned into this mountain, and I'm trying to bring them back down the mountain because that fact was wrong. But yes, that ability to have frank conversations with people and be that voice of reason is really freeing. It feels really good.
Yeah. And from a corporate perspective, right? I mean, you have, if everyone has their areas, sometimes the views are so different that, the CFO, the person that you have that's 100% focused on revenue, which there needs to be, and the person who, wants to give moms a year off for maternity leave, right? Those people. And I don't necessarily believe one is right and one is wrong. Because I also believe companies also have to stay in business, right? There's a lot of things that it would be great if they can do, but the bottom line is if they don't stay in business, you don't have a job at all. So they can only be so flexible. And so, and some of those things are fascinating, particularly now where the focus is so much on, employee rights is not the right word, but employee focus. I'm fascinated by what's happening with Apple, where he says, okay, you know what? COVID's over. Everybody needs to come back to work 3 days a week. And there is a mutiny. Right? People are like, this is not going to work. So I'm fascinated to see how that's going to play out because, the reality is there's a lot of good things about flexibility. There's a lot of good things about working at home. But when you talk about product or you talk about decisions that need to be hammered out, frankly, yelling at each other at a table that take 45 minutes in person and take 4 months virtually, there's some validity to people needing to be in the office at some point. And so it's fascinating to me how this is going to play out, because what I don't believe COVID has done is proven that everybody can work from home all the time. No.
Okay. I mean, I'm not in that workforce, so I wouldn't know. I don't know what it looks like. I don't think I could have worked at home all the time. It was just too distracting for me. Will you do it going forward? What's your plan going forward? Well, I mean, I mediate. So if people, I'm wherever people want me to be. So
Okay.
if they want me to be in their office, I'm in their office.
Okay.
If they want me to be in the firm office, then I'm there. If they want to do it online, then we do it online.
So do you see in what you do a benefit to being in person versus being virtual, or does it just depend on the situation?
It depends on the situation.
Okay.
It absolutely depends on the situation. And sometimes, unfortunately, you don't know until you're in the middle of it.
Right.
But yeah, there are pluses and minuses for it at every juncture. But for me so far, I would say maybe 2 cases that I've had was I'm glad we did these in person.
Right.
This wouldn't have worked out as well online. It's easier for everyone to do it online.
Right.
But sometimes, depending on what your plaintiff or your defendant need, sometimes being in person is what they need.
Right.
And so then, of course, we all have to show up for that because we're there to support them and to help get them through the process. But for the most part, most of it can be done online without interruption, without hiccup, without any kind of real change to the process.
Right. So it's interesting. So, if I think about a manufacturing floor, obviously people need to be there. And so then you think about things that are complementary to that. So theoretically, the marketing people could be at home all the time, but there is some dynamic where it's like, hey, run down to the floor so you can see this in process, or the engineers could work at home, right? Remotely, but there is also a teamwork interaction that happens when you're like, you come in with the whiteboard and let's figure out this problem. And so I do think that there is some, and I think staying home all the time is a lot. I think people need to get out of the house. And I think that there is some also sort of bonding with your peers and coworkers when you're in the office for a day and, have time to chit chat or whatever. So I do think that there's going to be some kind of hybrid, right? Yeah. And some jobs obviously will be able to, be at home all the time. My daughter, who's in technology, she works for a company that before COVID was 100% remote. That is just what they do. And, she's never known any different, and it seems to work great. And they're a service-based company, not a product-based company. Or I guess their product is a service, but, so they don't have, the manufacturing and the engineering and things like that. But I do think, and I also think that particularly with tech, the umbrella of tech is so big now. Technology used to be hardware. And no, it isn't anymore. And I think that there's going to be some movement between these companies that say, hey, you have to come back some, and companies that say, oh yeah, we're fine being completely remote. And I would just caution people that the grass is not always greener.
Oh, true. Very true. Very true. So when you're talking to women in particular, are you helping them try to figure out how their work schedule should look going forward?
No. So I don't do anything kind of that specific. What I am saying to women in particular and people in general is, do not go to your company and say, I want you to be flexible. Because that I want you to be flexible doesn't have any meaning. You need to know what you need before you can expect someone else to know what you need. So maybe you go to your company and say, let's not have meetings that start before 9:30 because I get the kids ready for school, drop them off, whatever. Or no meetings between 1 and 2, or let's only do meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm very obviously meeting focused, but those are the kind of things where you have to, you need people's calendars to line up.
Right.
So what I am saying is a couple of things. One, work-life balance is a fallacy. Don't try to go for it because that just sets you up for failure and makes you feel bad. Two, know what you specifically need, because I do think that COVID has meant that companies are much more open to trying to be helpful than they have been in the past. But that looks different for every single person.
Right. So I guess what I'm hearing is sit down with yourself, with your family, figure out what is going to work for you, and then approach management about how you make that work.
Exactly.
I love that. And I was actually just talking to a girlfriend about that. She wants to go back to work, but she is concerned that, she doesn't want to be away from her kids anymore because she's been home with them for so long. And so she's like, I know that I could do this job from home. I did my last job from home, well before COVID. And so we sat and we came up with a plan of action for her where she was going to say, can I work in the office every day for 6 months, prove myself, and then, come down to 2 days a week or 3 days a week or whatever. And that made her feel better about leaving her child for the first time in a year plus, right? So, I don't know what the update is on that yet, but
you know what? I love that. I was actually thinking about this morning. So I think that women in particular need to be careful about this idea of working from home and not make it that working at home means that you're simultaneously trying to take care of your kids. Because that sets everyone up for failure. It is, because I've known some people over the years who are like, okay, well, I'm going to work from home and keep my toddler and my baby at home so I don't have to pay for daycare and still work. And it was horrible for her. It was horrible for the company. And it was horrible for your kids because your toddler is going to have a meltdown when you're on with the CEO, even though they haven't done anything else for the last 2 weeks. So I do think that we need to be very, very careful separating working from home from the idea of keeping your kids at home and being the sole provider of childcare at the same time. Because I think that is really, really hard. And you're not set up for success on any level when you're doing that.
Right. But then, I wonder if women are going to choose, as they have been choosing, simply to not work.
If they can, right? If they can make that choice, women are doing that. What I don't know is if it's a choice to not work, or it's so many bad choices that becomes the easiest choice. Is it a choice where you're like, I want to stay home with my kids? And I have made no apologies. I had no desire to stay home with my kids. My first one went to daycare when she was 6 weeks old. My second one came back to work with me when she was 2 weeks old, while we could still pass her around. And as soon as she could move, she went to daycare. I was kind of the high school stay-at-home mom. But, so if you are choosing to stay home because you want to stay home with your kids for a year or 5 years or 10 years or whatever that is, I think that is a wonderful thing. When you are staying home with your kids because you have been pushed out or it has been made so difficult that you are at your wit's end, I think that's terrible. And I think that we miss out on this whole generation of amazing women who could really change things. And so I'm hopeful that as daycare becomes more available again, right? Because once everything closed, people didn't have a choice but to have their kids at home. But once daycare becomes more available again, I am hopeful that these women who really want to do something outside the home, whatever that looks like.
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping that women who were kind of forced, in quotes, forced out, will make it back in if that's what they want to do. I think what I love about being a woman is having choice. I like having choices. And I know not all women have choices. I get that that's a privilege, but that's what I like about being this woman in particular,
right.
the woman that I am. I have a lot of choices and I love that. It doesn't always feel like choices, but I know that they are, right?
Yeah.
I can decide what I want to do. I can decide what I get up and do every day. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another reason why watching what's been happening to other women during COVID has been so hard, because it kind of forced me to realize, oh, wait, I am coming from a very privileged position. I didn't want to accept that. I didn't want to acknowledge that at all. And it took some introspection on my part to really kind of come to terms with that. It was a very strange thing for me. Same. It took some introspection, and it took some getting out of my own way to acknowledge some of my privilege. I often say, like I said about LinkedIn, one of the biggest sources of privilege I have is being retired. Because what's anybody really going to do to me, no matter what my stance is on anything? But yes, I do think that the acknowledgement of the privilege that each of us have, whether it looks like other people's privilege or not, is an important thing, both personally and professionally. And, I'm hopeful that this year I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in some of the companies that came out and made statements that nothing seems to have changed, that they made statements that they want to be, good citizens of the world, and they want to have change, and they want their decision makers to change and their boards to change. And, I'm a 5'10" white blonde woman from California. And so I can talk about women. People that know me know that my world domination plan is actual equity. But I need to speak in a way that people can hear me. Right. And I have been sorely disappointed. I grew up in the Bay Area, so I have a lot of friends who are tech hotshots. I have both been personally and professionally disappointed in some of the actions that companies said that they were going to take, and there has been no change. And let me tell you what there is. There is a pipeline. So there are people who are ready to move into executive leadership, to move into your boardroom, to move up, to do more than just be the leader of the employee group that's studying something. So that's been a little disappointing to me. Yeah, I find a lot of disappointment in that type of thing as well. Being asked to join the diversity committee. I'm not equipped to be on your diversity committee. I don't know anything about diversity, equity, and inclusion. People go to school to study that. They get masters and PhDs, and I have neither.
Right. And this is nothing new. I mean, this has been going on for years and years and years. It's like the thing about, women, when you say, okay, well, you go in and you work harder and you figure out a way to kind of assimilate into the situation, because then your job becomes being the person that other women can see. So they can see some representation that you can make it. That is putting everything on the women. Where is a discussion about changing the situation or changing the workplace or changing the culture? We're just still, even today, telling people you just need to keep working harder. And that is false.
It's absolutely
and
false.
Wrong. And wrong.
And I hate it when I become that example. It's like, oh, well, Winter did it. Wait a minute.
No. And it's hard. No. And it's hard because you do what you were made to do. Right. Because that happens to me too. They're like, oh, well, you got here, but people shouldn't have to go through what I went through. And I have no doubt that you went through.
Yes.
To get there when they are just as talented, just as smart, that shouldn't be the case. And the problem I don't have to tell you. The problem is the system. I don't have to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like,
wow.
we have succeeded in spite of what was happening, and not everyone has that fortitude. And that is not a fault. That is not a fault. What is at fault here, like you said, is the system. And we need to be more inclusive, and we need to start making sure everyone is invited. Everyone who wants to have a chance actually has a chance. And stop making it extra difficult for people. Goodness, we could talk about this forever.
I know.
Like just this part. We have run out of time, and you're going to have to come back. That's just it. I have to come back. I really appreciate you. I have had so much fun talking to you today. Thank you for taking your time out on your weekend to have this conversation.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you inviting me. I love to do things like this that can speak to people at scale. It's funny because I'm a STEM girl, and I had no idea how much I was going to bond with my lawyers on LinkedIn, because I didn't know that it was still so difficult for women there. Yes. And so I was saddened. I was shocked and saddened that happened. So I appreciate you having me on, and it was great.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Mediate Now. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Music and audio editing provided by Encompass Podcast Studio. Take our advice. You will improve your entire life.